The room reeked of gunpowder and silence, so thick it hurt to breathe. Mateo stood across from us, eyes blazing. That girl, she knows too much. I clenched the anchor pendant, heart pounding. Damien, don't. One heartbeat. A gunshot. Mateo fell, blood spreading like red ink across the marble floor. Damien didn't move, hands still gripping the gun, eyes hollow, unreadable. I whispered, voice trembling, "Is this your justice?" He looked at me, cold, weary, broken. "No," he said quietly. "It's the price of truth." At a dazzling charity gala in Beverly Hills in that tumultuous year of 2025, I, Nora Hayes, a 25-year-old art teacher from LA, was recognized by Damien Valeri, also 25. Not because I was a celebrity, or because the dress I wore was too splendid, but because of a small object, hidden beneath the fabric of my dress, an anchor pendant. It was a relic of Bella Valeri, his twin sister, who was brutally murdered at the port of Los Angeles in 2015. The secret I had buried for 10 long years, a secret heavier than shackles, had now dragged me into an internal purge, a life and death game between justice and violence. 10 years ago, I was just a 15-year-old girl, accidentally becoming a witness to a horrific crime, a tragedy that claimed the lives of Bella and one other person. 10 years later, I stand here, under the dazzling lights of Hollywood, but my mind returns to that fateful night, with images of faces appearing and disappearing in the shadows and gunshots tearing through the night. That anchor, it is not only Bella's keepsake, but also the anchor holding my terrifying memories, an invisible thread binding me to a past I had tried to deny, to bury. Now, that thread has pulled me back, inevitably, into the world of the Valeri family, a world I never thought I would have any connection to. A world where so-called justice is defined by its own rules, and violence is a tool to achieve it. I had tried to live a normal, peaceful life, teaching art to children in Silver Lake, coloring their world. But perhaps, fate had a different plan for me, a plan full of danger and challenges. My life, my peaceful years, completely changed from the moment Damien saw that pendant. He looked at me, and I knew he had seen through the mask of peace I had tried to wear for a decade. Let me tell you about the people who shaped this story, and the places that witnessed its events. First, there's me, Nora Hayes. I am 25 years old, but my soul seems to have aged much more since that night in 2015. Back then, I was only 15, a carefree girl with simple dreams. But after witnessing the horrific massacre at the port of Los Angeles, everything changed. I have lived in fear and guilt for 10 years, trying to integrate into normal life. Currently, I am an art teacher at a school in Silver Lake, where I find a little peace in inspiring young souls. I love my job, I love the innocent smiles of my students, and I thought I could forever escape the past. But that anchor pendant, it is a constant reminder of Bella, of that fateful night, and of the silent promise I made to myself. I am a woman who has had to learn to survive, and now I must learn to face the truth. And then there is Damien Valeri, also 25 years old. He, unlike me, was born into a world of power and responsibility. As the heir to the Valerie Foundation, a renowned charity organization, he carries the burden of a family whose terrifying nature I am only just beginning to understand. Damien is a man with deep eyes, containing the pain of loss and an iron will. He is not just a charity mogul. He is the mastermind of a complex network, a man willing to do anything to protect what he believes is right, to bring justice to his twin sister. Although I first met him in a horrific circumstance, I sensed the hidden goodness within him, a goodness concealed by the harsh world he has to exist in. He is a strong man, but also carries indelible scars. The villain of this story, the one who sowed crime and betrayal, is Matteo Luciani. He is an underboss, a name I accidentally overheard on that fateful night. I don't know much about him, but through Damien's eyes, I understand that Matteo is a great threat, a man who stops at nothing to achieve his goals, one who betrayed trust and caused tragedy for the Valeri family. He represents the dark side, corruption and insatiable greed. Beside Damien are his close associates. Luca Morello is Damien's right-hand man, an intelligent, dedicated, and extremely effective man. He is the one who helps Damien run everything, from legitimate business to the more complex activities of the family. Luca is Damien's eyes and ears, the one he completely trusts. And there is Guillaume Vincent Kane, Damien's head of security, a tall, taciturn man with constantly vigilant eyes. He is a solid steel wall, always ensuring the safety of Damien and those around him. Vincent is the embodiment of protection, of an unwavering commitment to the family. He appeared the night I was taken from my apartment, and I know he is the person you want by your side when things get dangerous. The assassin, the one who took Bella's life, is Diego Navarro, a man from the Tijuana cartel, a cold-blooded killer with a prominent blue-black snake tattoo on his arm. The image of that snake has haunted me for 10 years, a terrifying memory of cruel crime and indifference. He is a mercenary, a pawn in a larger game, but he is the one who directly caused irreparable pain. The locations where our story unfolds also hold special meaning. The Gala at Beverly Grand Hotel is where everything began, where past and present intertwined fatefully. Terminal Island, San Pedro, is the setting of that horrific night in 2015, where I witnessed loss and death. Damien's penthouse downtown Lay is the center of all activities, where secrets are exposed and plans are laid out. The compound Malibu is a hideaway, a different world, where a little peace can be found amidst the storm. And finally, Forest Lawn Cemetery, Glendale, where the deceased rest, where we go to confront the past, to lay to rest what was lost and seek release. That night, at the charity gala in Beverly Hills, everything seemed arranged for me to easily blend into the crowd. I am not one for glamorous events, but as an art teacher, I understand the value of fundraising for good causes. I wore a dark blue dress, trying to blend into the luxurious atmosphere while maintaining a certain distance. Melodious music filled the ballroom, the murmur of conversations blending together. I sipped a glass of wine, trying to relax and enjoy the evening, but something kept making me feel uneasy. Perhaps it was the atmosphere, too different from my daily life, or perhaps it was a premonition of something about to happen. My eyes scanned the crowd and stopped at a man. It was Damien Valeri. He stood in a corner of the room, talking to a group of people, but his gaze had a strange allure. He was tall, elegant in a black suit, and his face held something both strong and melancholic. I wondered who he was, but then I turned away, trying not to pay too much attention. I had vaguely heard about the Valeri Foundation, about their significant contributions to the community, but I never thought I would have the chance to meet its head. And then, the inevitable happened. Perhaps it was a twist of fate. I was walking through the middle of the ballroom, my hand unconsciously reaching up to touch the anchor pendant hidden beneath the silk fabric of my dress. That anchor, I had worn it every day for the past 10 years, as a silent reminder of Bella, of that fateful night. I could never take it off. It had become a part of me, a talisman, and also a burden. At that moment, Damien's eyes met mine. It wasn't an ordinary curious gaze, but a sharp, cold look, as if he was searching for something. I felt a jolt run down my spine. I tried to avoid his gaze, but it seemed to be locked onto me. Then he moved closer, slowly, step by step. I felt my heart pound in my chest. I knew something was wrong. I had tried to hide it for too long, but now I felt it being exposed. When Damien stood before me, he said nothing. He just stared at me, his eyes scanning me, stopping at the location of the pendant. I could feel the heat of his gaze penetrating the fabric. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I tried to force a smile, but I knew that smile couldn't hide the anxiety welling up inside me. I felt like I was standing on thin ice, and that ice was beginning to crack. Then he spoke, his voice deep but authoritative, as if he already knew the answer. "What are you wearing around your neck?" The question was simple but echoed in my ears like thunder. I felt my whole body freeze. I tried to think of a lie, An excuse, but no words came out of my mouth. I could only look at him, my eyes wide with fear. I knew, from that moment, my life would never be the same again. The anchor had been discovered. My secret had been discovered. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. A cold dread spread through my body. I tried to stay calm, tried to breathe deeply, but my breath still caught in my chest. Damien still looked at me, his gaze scrutinizing, full of suspicion but also containing a deep pain. I knew. He had recognized it. That anchor. It was Bella's. I don't know how long I stood there, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, I managed to utter a few words, my voice trembling. This is just an old pendant. A weak, meaningless lie. He just shook his head slightly, the corner of his mouth turning down painfully. That's my sister's, he said, his voice just a whisper, but it was enough to make me feel like my whole world was collapsing beneath my feet. Bella. And then, his gaze shifted from the anchor directly to my eyes, a look of shock and disbelief. It was a shock not only for him, but also for me. I knew, from that moment, I could no longer deny it. My 10-year lie had been exposed. Everything I had tried to build, to hide the past, was now shattered. I felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss, and there was no way back. The splendid gala, the melodious music, the fake smiles, all vanished, leaving only me and Damien, and Bella's ghost hovering between us. After that terrifying gala night, I returned to my small apartment in Echo Park, a relentless anxiety clinging to me. I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, thinking about Damien's gaze, his question, about the truth I had tried to bury. I knew that being discovered was only a matter of time, but I couldn't prepare myself for it. I opened the apartment door, turned on the light, and I saw him. Damien Valeri, sitting on my sofa, in the dark, like a ghost. My heart constricted, a small gasp escaping my throat. I took a step back, my hand unconsciously reaching for anything I could use to defend myself. What are you doing here? My voice trembled. He stood up, his tall figure filling my small room. I need answers, he said, his voice unwavering, but I sensed the anger hidden within. I felt an extreme fear engulf me. Answers for what? I tried to appear calm, but my hand still trembled. Damien didn't answer directly. He just moved closer, step by step, as if cornering me. The anchor, he said. Where did you get it? His gaze met mine directly, unyielding. I knew. There was no way to lie anymore. I felt suffocated, as if the air in the room had been sucked out. I couldn't speak. I could only look at him, my eyes welling up with tears. I knew. Now I had to face the truth. Finally, I opened my mouth, my voice just a whisper. I was there. And so, everything began. Damien asked me to tell him everything. He sat down opposite me, listening intently to every word, every detail. I began to tell, my voice hoarse with emotion and fear. I told him about that fateful night in 2015, when I was only 15. I had hidden in a dilapidated old warehouse office on Terminal Island, San Pedro. My father, a dock worker, often worked late, and sometimes I went there to wait for him to come home. That night, I was playing with some crayons in an old sketchbook. The damp, salty air of the sea seeped through the cracks in the door. The smell of oil and rusty iron mixed with the smell of fresh fish. I heard footsteps outside, then the sound of a truck engine. I thought it was my father, so I held my breath, trying not to make a sound, wanting to surprise him. But it wasn't my father. I heard the warehouse door open, a dim light streaming in from outside. I hid tightly in a dark corner, behind a tall stack of cardboard boxes. Through the gap in the boxes, I saw Enzo. I had met Enzo a few times when I was with my father. He was a dock worker, always with a gentle smile. He was carrying Bella. Bella, the girl with long black hair and bright eyes. I remember Bella smiled a lot, a radiant smile like sunshine. But that night, Bella wasn't smiling. She was unconscious, nestled in Enzo's arms. The dim moonlight streamed in through the dirty window, illuminating Bella's pale face. Enzo gently placed Bella on the floor. He seemed to be trying to check her pulse, his hands trembling. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't understand what was happening, but I felt a cold dread begin to creep into my mind. Then, 3 strangers appeared. They wore black clothes, their faces covered, revealing only their cold eyes. They said nothing, just approached Enzo and Bella. I felt a chill emanating from them. One of them picked up a phone, a hoarse voice echoing in the silent space. "Found," he said. Then I heard a name mentioned, a name I would never forget. Luciani. Luciani. That name, I didn't know what it meant at the time, but it was etched into my mind. I felt my whole body tremble uncontrollably. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but fear had locked me in place. I could only hide tightly, my eyes fixed on the horrific scene unfolding before me. Then, a piercing sound tore through the silent night. Gunshots. 1 shot. 2 shots. Enzo collapsed, blood beginning to spread on the cold concrete floor. I held my breath, tears beginning to stream from my eyes. I wanted to close my eyes, to see nothing, but I couldn't. I was frozen in horror. The assassin, the one who shot Enzo, turned to Bella. I saw him, a man with a prominent blue-black snake tattoo on his arm. That image has haunted me for 10 years. He raised his gun, and then another shot rang out. Bella. Not a sound, not a last word. Just deadly silence. I felt like I had been crushed by a rock. My entire world collapsed. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. Tears streamed down my face, mixing with dirt and sweat. I was there, hidden behind the boxes, witnessing Bella, the girl with the radiant smile, brutally murdered. I felt a heartbreaking pain, a terrible helplessness. The strangers left, leaving me alone in the dark warehouse, between 2 cold bodies. I don't know how long I was there. Time seemed to stop. I could only cry, silently, for Bella, for Enzo, and for myself, the 15-year-old girl who had witnessed something horrific that no one should ever witness. I stayed there until I heard police sirens in the distance, the sound of people shouting. Then I realized I couldn't stay here anymore. I had to run. I had to escape. I couldn't be discovered. I don't know how I got Bella's anchor pendant. Perhaps in a panic, I accidentally touched it and clutched it in my hand. It was the only thing left from that fateful night, a silent testament to Bella's existence and to the crime that had occurred. As I ran from the warehouse, I tried not to leave any traces. I hid in the shadows, ran through deserted streets, and finally found my way home. I never dared to tell anyone what I had witnessed. Fear had locked my words away. I had buried that secret, buried those horrific memories, for 10 long years. When I finished telling the story, the atmosphere in the apartment became heavy. Damien remained silent, his eyes fixed on me, but now there was no anger or suspicion, only pain, extreme pain. Tears began to stream down his cheeks. I looked at him, and I felt a strange connection between us, 2 people bound by the past. I had kept the secret for too long, and now it had been exposed. I felt a little relief, but along with it came a new fear, the fear of what would happen next. Right after I finished speaking about what happened in 2015, Damien's phone rang. He answered, his voice becoming sharp and commanding. I didn't understand what he was saying, but I sensed the tension in the air. He turned to me, his eyes urgent. "We have to go now," he said. "Someone is watching you." Before I could ask more, my apartment door burst open, and Vincent Kane appeared. He was tall, silent, and quick. Vincent didn't say a word, just motioned for me and Damien to follow him. I felt a panic rising. Everything happened too fast. I couldn't react. I looked around my apartment one last time, where I had tried to find peace and knew I wouldn't be able to return there for a while. We rushed down the stairs, not using the elevator. Vincent's footsteps were firm, Damien walked behind him, and I was sandwiched between the two, feeling like a trapped bird. When we got out of the building, a black SUV was already parked on the sidewalk. Vincent opened the door, pushing me into the back seat. Damien quickly got in too. The car sped off immediately, racing through the streets of Echo Park. I turned my head, looking through the rear window, and I saw them. 2 other black sedans were tailing us, their headlights like lurking eyes in the dark. My heart pounded in my chest. This was no coincidence. This was a chase. I felt a cold fear engulf me. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice just a whisper. Damien didn't answer. He just looked straight ahead, his face tense and determined. The SUV swerved through winding roads, trying to shake off the pursuers. I felt myself being thrown from side to side, my body hitting the seat. Vincent drove skillfully. He was a professional driver. We passed intersections, crossed dark alleys. The sedans still persistently followed, their headlights still flickering behind us. I didn't know where I was going, or what my fate would be. I only knew that I was being drawn into a world I never belonged to. Finally, after what felt like an endless chase, the SUV turned into an underground parking garage. The iron gate slammed shut behind us, locking us into a temporary safe world. I breathed a sigh of relief, but the fear still lingered. Vincent led us to a private elevator, and then we went up, higher and higher, until the elevator door opened. I stepped out of the elevator, and I found myself standing in a vast, luxurious penthouse with a panoramic view of downtown LA. The sparkling lights of the city stretched out before me like a giant carpet. This apartment was completely different from my small one. Modern furniture, abstract paintings, floor-to-ceiling glass windows. But no matter how luxurious, I still felt a coldness. This was Damien Valeri's world. This was where secrets were kept, and life and death decisions were made. Damien turned to me, his face still tense. "You'll be safe here," he said. I wasn't sure about that. I felt like a hostage in my own life. I had been drawn into a war I didn't want, and I didn't know if I could escape. I only knew that, from now on, my life would never be peaceful again. I was confined in that luxurious penthouse for several days. Although treated politely, with all amenities, the feeling of being watched, of being controlled, still suffocated me. I walked around the spacious apartment, looking out at the bustling city below, but my mind kept returning to the past, to that fateful night at the port of Los Angeles. I knew Damien was working, trying to find the truth, and I was an important part of that investigation. One morning, Luca Morello, Damien's right-hand man, came to see me. He brought a laptop and a stack of documents. Luca was a calm, intelligent man, with sharp eyes. He didn't say much, but every word he spoke carried weight. "We are tracking Diego Navarro," he said, his voice deep. "We need you to confirm a few details." He opened the laptop, displaying a series of photos. Photos of different men, but I immediately recognized one. It was him, the assassin with the blue-black snake tattoo. Even though 10 years had passed, that image was still etched in my mind. I trembled as I pointed to the photo. "This is him," I said, my voice just a whisper. "Diego Navarro." Luca nodded. We matched his travel history and tattoo photos. He is a professional assassin, frequently moving between countries. He scrolled through some other documents, displaying wire transfer chains. In 2015, there was a large wire transfer from a shell company in Baja to an account in Tijuana. It coincided with the time of Bella and Enzo's case. I felt a chill run down my spine. Everything was slowly being revealed. The fragmented pieces of my memory were now being put together with concrete evidence. Luca explained that Diego Navarro was a notorious assassin belonging to the Tijuana cartel, a transnational criminal organization. He was a hired hand, a tool in the hands of those in power. I looked at the evidence on the screen, feeling a shiver. The image of the blue-black snake, the numbers of the wire transfer chain, the name Diego Navarro, all pointed to a cruel truth, a meticulously planned crime. I knew that tracking down Diego Navarro was a big step, but I also knew that he was just a pawn. Who was behind him? Who gave the order? A few days later, Damien and Luca brought an old, dilapidated folder, carefully sealed with wax. I looked at it, feeling a mix of curiosity and anxiety. "These are our family records," Damien said, his voice deep. "They have been buried for 10 years. Luca carefully opened the wax seal, and I saw old, faded minutes. They were minutes from the Valeri Family Council from July to August 2015. I read through each line, each word, and I couldn't believe my eyes. In those minutes, Damien's father, the head of the Valeri family at the time, accused Matteo Luciani of cartel dealings and siphoning family funds. These accusations were made just weeks before Bella and Enzo were murdered, and days before Damien's father himself was killed in a mysterious accident. I felt a shiver. This was not a random murder. This was an internal purge, a cruel betrayal. Matteo Luciani, the name I had heard on that terrifying night, was not just a villain, he was a traitor. He had exploited the family's trust, colluded with the cartel, and then killed those who knew too much, including Bella and Damien's father. I looked at Damien, his eyes filled with indignation and pain. His grief was now covered by anger. "He hid this truth for 10 years, he said, his voice strained. "He let us live in pain and suspicion." I felt a deep empathy for Damien. He not only lost his sister, but also his father, and now he had to face the truth that someone within his own family had caused that tragedy. Finding these records was undeniable proof. It not only identified Matteo as the mastermind behind Bella's case, but also exposed the corruption and betrayal within the Valeri family. I knew, from now on, there was no turning back. Damien would never forgive Matteo, and neither would I. I had witnessed that crime, and I would never be silent again. After the evidence of Matteo Luciani's betrayal was exposed, everything became extremely tense. The atmosphere in the penthouse was so thick, it felt hard to breathe. Damien knew that keeping secrets was no longer an option. He had to confront Matteo. One afternoon, Damien received a call from Matteo. He requested a meeting, not in a public place, but right at Damien's penthouse. I felt a surge of anxiety. This was either a trap or an unavoidable confrontation. Damien didn't flinch. He accepted. Vincent and Luca prepared everything. The penthouse was thoroughly checked, every corner secured. I felt like I was in an action movie, but this was real life, and I was a character in it. I didn't know if I should be present, but Damien insisted that I had to be there. "You are a witness," he said. "You need to see the truth exposed." When Matteo arrived, he wasn't alone. He brought 6 other men, all dressed in black suits, looking cold and vigilant. They entered the penthouse, their eyes sweeping across the room. The air became thick, as if an invisible force was stretching everything taut. Matteo, with a smug and authoritative expression, walked straight into the living room. He showed no fear, even managing a sneer. Damien stood opposite him, his face tense, but his eyes sharp as knives. Luca and Vincent stood on either side of Damien, ready to act at any moment. I stood back a little, behind Damien, trying not to reveal the fear welling up inside me. The confrontation began. There were no polite greetings, only sharp glances and extreme tension. Matteo began to speak, his voice deep but full of menace. He spoke of the need to maintain order, of how secrets needed to be buried to protect the family. He tried to manipulate Damien, tried to deny all accusations. I felt a surge of disgust. He was a liar, a traitor. By then, Damien had listened patiently. But when Matteo began to speak of collateral damage, of innocent lives that could be sacrificed for a greater good, I saw Damien's eyes ignite with a furious fire. "Collateral damage?" Damien said, his voice strained. "Bella and my father were not collateral damage." And then, Damien began to expose Matteo's facade. He signaled to Luca. Luca stepped forward, placed a projector on the table, and projected the documents we had found onto the wall. The Valeri Family Council minutes from 2015, with Damien's father's accusations against Matteo. Then, Luca projected the wire transfer chains from the shell company in Baja to Diego Navarro's account. And finally, the image of Diego Navarro, with his prominent blue-black snake tattoo. I looked at Matteo. His expression changed from smugness to astonishment, then anger, and finally fear. He could no longer deny it. The evidence was too clear, too specific. He looked at me, his eyes sharp as knives, as if he wanted to devour me. I knew he had recognized me as the witness, the one who had seen everything. This girl, Matteo began to say, she knows nothing. She's just a scared child. He tried to deny, tried to downplay my role, but Damien wouldn't let him. He looked at Matteo, his eyes full of contempt. She knows everything, Damien said. She was there. She witnessed you order the murders, and now she is living proof. Matteo took a step back, his whole body trembling. He looked around at the men who came with him, but no one dared to move. He had been exposed. He had been cornered. The air in the room became extremely tense, as if a string was about to snap. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable. The confrontation had reached its climax, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The atmosphere in the penthouse seemed to freeze after Matteo was exposed. His face, from arrogant, had turned pale with fear, but in his eyes, a final cruel glint still shone. He knew he was cornered, with no way out. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as he turned to look at me, his eyes full of menace. This girl, he said, his voice hoarse. She knows too much. She's a witness. She must be eliminated. Those words hit me like a thunderbolt. I felt my whole body tremble uncontrollably. Eliminated. He wanted to kill me. Extreme fear engulfed me. I took a step back, leaning against the cold wall, feeling like I was about to collapse. But Damien reacted like lightning. He had anticipated this. As soon as Matteo uttered those threats, Damien pulled a gun from his jacket, a cold silver gun, and pointed it directly at Matteo. Vincent and Luca also immediately drew their guns, aiming at Matteo's men. No one dared to move. The air in the room seemed to stop, only the pounding of my heart in my chest. You betrayed the family, Damien said, his voice unwavering, but containing extreme anger. You killed my father, killed my sister, and you dare to threaten an innocent witness. He spoke, each word like a dagger plunged into Matteo. Family rules are paramount, and you violated them all. Matteo tried to say something, tried to make an excuse, but Damien didn't give him a chance. There is no excuse for betrayal, Damien said, his eyes cold as ice. There is no excuse for selling out the family for profit. Then, Damien pulled the trigger. A dry gunshot tore through the silence of the room. Matteo fell, without a sound. Blood began to spread on the marble floor. Everything happened too fast, too suddenly. I felt a strong shock run through my body. I covered my mouth, trying not to scream. I had witnessed a murder. For the second time in my life. The room fell into a deadly silence. Matteo's men stood motionless, their eyes full of fear. Vincent and Luca still held their guns pointed at them, ensuring no one dared to do anything foolish. Damien stood there, the gun still in his hand, a faint wisp of smoke rising from the barrel. His face was cold, but I could see the deep pain in his eyes. He had done what he had to do. He had avenged his family. I felt a turmoil in my mind. On one hand, I understood why Damien did it. Matteo was the one who caused the tragedy for his family, the one who threatened my life. He deserved to pay. But on the other hand, witnessing such a brutal death horrified me. Violence. That was what I had tried to avoid for 10 years. And now, I was drawn into it again. Damien turned to Matteo's men. You have seen the consequences of betrayal, he said, his voice full of authority. From now on, no one is allowed to go against the family. No one is allowed to betray trust. The men just nodded, their faces pale. They understood that Mateo's death was a warning, a reminder of Damien's absolute power. After that, Vincent signaled for the men to leave. They quickly left the penthouse, leaving Damien and us with Mateo's body. Luca began to make calls, his voice calm, ordering a team to clean up the scene. I stood there, looking at the bloodstain on the floor, feeling my whole body tremble. I knew that dealing with Mateo was a necessary act according to family rules, but it also opened a new wound in my soul. I had witnessed a horrific event, and I didn't know if I could overcome it. Damien upheld the principle of family first, but the price for that principle, for me, was too high. The gunshot and Matteo Luciani's death still echoed in my mind. I couldn't escape that image. Although I understood that Damien did it to protect himself and avenge his family, violence was still violence. It was too much for someone who had tried to live a peaceful life like me. Immediately after everything ended, I couldn't stay in that penthouse for another second. I felt suffocated, felt a surge of disgust within me. I turned to Damien, my eyes filled with panic and disappointment. "I can't stay here anymore," I said, my voice hoarse. "I have to go." Damien looked at me, his eyes full of concern, but he didn't stop me. Perhaps he understood how I felt. Vincent immediately appeared, as if he had anticipated my actions. He drove me away from the penthouse, and I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that I needed to escape that place, escape the atmosphere of death and brutality. I could not accept that world. In the following days, I lived in a state of extreme confusion. I didn't return to my apartment, but found a small hotel in an unfamiliar place. I tried to stay away from everything, away from calls from Damien and Luca. I needed time to process everything that had happened, to try to find peace in my soul. But how could I find peace when the image of death still haunted me? While I was trying to find myself again, an important event took place, an event I only learned about later through Damien and Luca's accounts. It was the Valeri Family Council meeting in 2025, held in Las Vegas. I imagined it was a tense meeting, where the heads of the Valeri family branches gathered to make important decisions. Damien presented all the evidence we had found: the 2015 council minutes, the wire transfer chains, and my testimony. He exposed the full truth about Matteo Luciani's betrayal, about how he colluded with the cartel, siphoned family funds, and ordered the murders of Bella and Damien's father. The council had to face a cruel truth, an undeniable truth. Finally, the council confirmed Matteo Luciani's betrayal. They recognized that Matteo was guilty and that Damien's actions were justified, legalized. According to family rules, dealing with a traitor was necessary to maintain order and honor. The council's decision was a final verdict, an acknowledgement that Damien had carried out justice in the family's own way. For them, it was the closing of a dark chapter. But for me, it was a difficult choice. Could I accept a form of justice carried out through violence? Could I live with a man who had personally ended the life of his enemy? I knew that Damien was not a cold-blooded killer. He was a man burdened by pain and responsibility. But I could not easily accept those actions. After the council meeting, Damien contacted me again. He didn't force me to return, but he wanted me to know that I was safe. "You can go back to your life," he said, his voice full of concern. "You are free, but there are a few conditions." What were those conditions? I would be discreetly protected for a few weeks, ensuring there were no threats from anyone connected to Matteo Luciani. I could return to my teaching job in Silver Lake, return to the normal life I had tried to build. But I knew that life would never be normal again. I had seen too much, known too much. I returned to school, trying to reintegrate into my work. The children still greeted me with innocent smiles, but I felt changed. I looked at their innocent faces, and I felt an intense desire to protect them from the dark sides of the world. I knew that I could not completely escape Damien and his world. The thread of fate had bound us together. I still lived in fear, but that fear was no longer the fear of being hunted. It was the fear of what I had witnessed, of what I had known. I was trying to find my own path, a path where I could live a meaningful life without being drawn into the spiral of violence. I knew this was a rift in our relationship, a rift between justice and violence, between love and choice. And I had to find a way to mend it, or accept that there were boundaries I could not cross. A few weeks after everything settled down, Damien and I had a date I would never forget. It wasn't a typical romantic date, but a journey to the past, to where everything began and ended. We went to Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, a peaceful place, covered with green trees and white gravestones. The gentle afternoon sun shone through the leaves, creating sparkling streaks of light on the grass. We walked among the rows of gravestones, searching. Finally, we stopped before two graves. One was Bella Valeri's, Damien's twin sister. The other was Enzo's. I looked at Bella's gravestone, and the image of the girl with the radiant smile reappeared in my mind. Tears began to stream down my cheeks. 10 years, the pain was still fresh. Damien stood beside me, also silent. I felt his pain, the pain of losing a loved one. He placed a bouquet of white hydrangeas on Bella's gravestone. I looked at the words carved on the gravestone, words commemorating a life too short. I clutched the anchor pendant in my hand, the only keepsake I had kept from that fateful night. With trembling hands, I took the pendant off my neck. It had been a part of me for 10 years, a burden and also a reminder. I placed the anchor on Bella's gravestone, next to Damien's bouquet. It was a promise, a silent promise I had made to myself 10 years ago. Survive. Now, I had survived. And I had returned the anchor to Bella, as a release, a closing of a sad chapter in my life. I turned to Damien, his eyes also filled with tears. We stood there, among the graves, sharing pain and loss. It was a moment when we truly connected, not through violence or secrets, but through understanding and sharing. After leaving the cemetery, we sat in a small cafe, trying to talk about our future. I knew that the relationship between me and Damien could not be a normal one. We came from two different worlds, and what we had been through had changed us forever. I looked at Damien, my eyes resolute. I want to keep my apartment in Silver Lake, I said. And I want to continue my teaching job. I need that peace. Damien nodded. He understood. And we need to be transparent, I continued. No more secrets. We need to have clear boundaries. I explained that I could not accept violence as a part of our lives. I could not live in fear or secrecy. If things go beyond my limits, I said, I have the right to leave. I have the right to choose my own life. Damien looked at me. He said nothing, but I knew he understood. He knew that I needed freedom, safety, and respect. And so, an agreement was established. An agreement for a gray area love, where justice and violence, love and choice, coexist. We would try to find a common path, a path where we could love each other without losing ourselves. 6 months later, at the end of 2025, my life had gradually stabilized. I still taught at this school in Silver Lake, inspiring my students with art. My life seemed to have returned to normal, but I knew it was never normal again. I still kept my small apartment, still lived a simple life, but occasionally, I would go to Damien's Malibu compound. It was a peaceful place, with views of the clear blue sea, where we could find a little peace and privacy. Every month, I brought flowers to Forest Lawn Cemetery, placing them on Bella's gravestone. It was a reminder of the past, of what I had lost, and of what I had found. Damien and I were still together, but our relationship was a delicate balance, a compromise between two worlds. We learned to set boundaries, learned to respect each other's differences. I still often remembered that fateful night at the port of Los Angeles, the image of the blue-black snake, the gunshots. But now, those memories no longer haunted me as before. I had learned to live with them, learned to turn pain into strength. I had survived, and I was living a meaningful life. I was still afraid, but I was no longer alone. I had Damien, a man who helped me find the truth, and also the one who helped me find a new path for my life. I knew our love was a gray area love, imperfect, not easy, but it was our love. And it only existed if both of us knew how to set boundaries, knew how to respect each other's space and choices. That was the biggest lesson I learned from this tumultuous journey. Boundaries. That was the only thing that could keep us safe, keep our love alive, in a world full of justice and violence. This is my story, Nora Hayes, an art teacher who was drawn into an internal purge and found love in a world I never thought I would belong to.